Actually, I was reading it was a Gallup poll in I believe it was the Wall Street Journal that showed that it was about 50% of employees were unhappy with their current job and actually were seeking alternative employment. That's staggeringly high.
Burnout is always a thing. It's always been a thing, I feel like, but I feel like it's becoming a lot more commonplace.
Because, like we touched on, maybe I think it was our very first episode where we talked about primary care, and we talked about how 1 in 3 people in this country do not have a primary care doctor. You can still get paid maybe what you consider to be appropriately and still certainly have a lot of discontent for what you're doing. How much control do you have over the work that you're doing? And so workloads, as those increase, and as we've seen, over the course of, say, COVID, there was a lot of businesses lost money. A lot of corporations lost money. There was strategic changes to recover a lot of that. Yeah, the doctor walked into the room and they had one foot in the doorway the whole time.
Right.
They were in, they were out, they didn't look at you. They sat and typed in their computer the whole time. I've never found it to be super useful to say, oh, hey, you just need to change jobs, right? That's a lot easier said than done.
Right.
But
in a lot of different aspects, it could seem at times to a higher entity, a corporate, you're just a machine in the cog. You're a cog in the machine. You're there to try and keep things moving along, and people don't have any kind of control or autonomy. They're there to work, and they get burnt out, and they're saying, you know what, I don't need this. So then they take that workload and distribute it to the people that are still existing.
Yeah.
Which will then cause them to feel more of the pressure and more burnout.
We got up at 5 a.m. to come to this meeting before diving into our patient care activities to be told to do yoga. And I was like, well, I would have probably rather had that hour of sleep so that I could recharge. Instead of fixing the problem, let's just make people deal with it better. It's like, well, that is, to me, that is ridiculous. Burnout, generally speaking, it comes with a degree of unhappiness. Right. It's unhappy with your job. Typically, burnout starts with your occupation, but that can carry over into your home life. Mm-hmm. It can affect relationships. It can affect the type of partner you are, the type of parent you are. It can increase anxiety. It can increase rates of depression. And then we get into, even a step further than that, suicide rates. Mm. But suicide rates as a profession are highest in healthcare professionals. Stress, the pressure cooker, if you will, feeling of unhappiness, feeling of isolation, these are all things that we see develop with burnout. And unfortunately, sometimes we see it take that next step to where folks are actually considering ending their life as a result of this.
It's almost approached with it over a bullet hole kind of an approach. Hey, guess what? Good news. Pizza party. Everybody loves those.
Yeah. Wow. I was kind of referred to those as like forced fun. They actually adopted a 4-day work week in an effort to, say, reduce sense of burnout, reduce some of that overworked nature. And that had, as you can imagine, fantastic results. Increased productivity. So it turns out sometimes less is more. And so cutting back and increased productivity, increased satisfaction, and everybody's happy. A higher satisfied physician likely indicates better patient care deliverance. Sometimes it's a matter of taking a gamble on yourself too. Saying, hey, you know what, I'm capable of doing this. My advice to anybody who's watching, anyone who's listening, is do not settle. We only get one trip around this earth here. Life is far too short. Don't settle. There's an expression that the rising tide raises all ships, right? I think that our goal with this is to be the tide, right? To elevate everybody. To something perhaps that they weren't aware that they could become. Rising tide raises all ships. We're all in this together.